The topic I've chosen this morning for our consideration is the permanence of change. Now, in trying to struggle with this idea the last 10 days, I've really come to some conclusions that I want to test out on you, some notions, some ideas. Some 40 years ago, I decided I couldn't do anything else but what I'm doing now, and that is struggling with people to understand more fully the mysteries of life, responding not from science, from the religious tradition, from the spiritual tradition, from history, from the stories of being and coping. It's been an interesting journey. 10 years of that was spent in a sabbatical, dealing with the reality of a deadly heart disease. Well, that was culminated with a miracle, a modern secular miracle, as most of you know, of a heart transplant, June the 21st, 2010. So after 10 years of trying to reckon with my ultimate demise, understanding that it was a crapshoot whether a heart would come along, I know I'm special. My mother told me I was. But it's sort of tough when you're special and O negative too, because O negative is pretty special. You know, we're the universal donor. Well, the bottom side of that is you can only take from O negative. Well, there was a black lady, 32 years old, named Laquita Mims, who went to Baton Rouge the same weekend as this event would happen, to have a procedure on her thyroid, and she didn't wake up. And her mom and dad decided, after consultation with the family, to let their youngest of 6's body be harvested, donated, to save other lives. Well, I'm Laquita Mims' legacy this morning here. The permanency of change is the topic. So I've been looking at life a long time in a lot of different ways, and it's gotten up close and personal. I spent time as an Army chaplain and a hospital chaplain as a staff chaplain. And one night at Bethesda Oak Hospital, back in my younger days when I was black-headed, I dealt with 6 deaths one night, and all the energy that comes with that, with the families and with the issues and with the staff, because it's very interesting in medical facilities. More times than not, the chaplain and the nurse are left to deal with the family. The medical professionals have other things to do, or also deal with their own absence of ability to defeat death. So here's the chaplain and the nurse, the caregivers up close and personal, the nurse that can hold hands, and the chaplain who's got to stand with something to say or say nothing at all and be with the family in ultimate mystery. The permanency of change has influenced me all of my life, because I came from a sharecropper in Middle Tennessee to get an adequate education, but also to have some kind of fire that burned in my belly to be something else than a truck driver or working at the factory. So I've moved through all kinds of changes in my life. I've passed as an educated man. I fool really smart people to think I'm smart. But I think I brought Doak Mansfield to people's lives because I recognize that I don't know the answers and I can barely understand the questions. And having the courage to stand up and say that, and to act on that as a minister of faith. A faith and a trust in life that we can ferret out the interest, what's important. So here we are, the permanency of change. We're set in a pattern because of our situation on this planet in this celestial order, in the cosmos. So we go through the seasons. We go through the changes. But also, I want to talk about the change that has occurred in humanity. As we've grown from a creature with potential to occupy and conquer and be the steward of life, to being now possible to destroy life with an atom bomb and to put someone else's heart in my chest and I walk away from it and have another extended period of life. We live in a time of miracles and a time of change. And those changes come slowly, but they are permanent. It's nearly like a spiral. Consider a spiral. We move through this process of seasons and of accomplishments and human history, and we sort of lurch in a movement. and we pick up speed and we slow down. But we move and everything is changed in the process. I'm reading a biography of Woodrow Wilson right now. And he makes a point in 1912 when he's running for president as a Southerner from Virginia, and proud of his Southern background, and basically a racist, as most white people were in 1912. And the fact was that this historian made the point that in that year of 1912, there was a black lynching once every week, at least in the United States. So here we are, about 100 years from that point, and that routine has changed somewhat. Now, we've got violence in the street of St. Louis, we've got violence in the street of Cleveland, we've got violence around the world, and we're shooting and maiming one another, and people of privilege are trying to tell us how to feel, me included, about that. I'm saying just feel the experience. And the best you can do is keep your mouth shut and consider what it might be to be a black person walking the streets of Ferguson, Missouri. That's all I ask of you. But the permanency of change occurs because we learn better ways to cope. We understand more broadly what the noble intentions of humanity is. Now, this is my notion I want to test with you, okay? There's a process in life, a system of life that is interdependent on one another. And there's a force in this life that moves through all this creation, this interdependent organism. And we are part of it. Our consciousness comes and goes in the flickering of it. But it's a holistic process. Now, maybe that's what the ancients saw and tried to understand as God. And they named that mystery. They named that concept because that's all they had to know, was a high king or a power or a warlord. And their creativity and their projection was limited to what they could conceive. And finally, someone said, a monotheist, an Akhenaten back in the day, that there's a sun. And that's the ultimate deity. That's the only deity. Well, that's pretty good logic. Because Akhenaten saw in that power in the sky how it affected crops, how it affected the Nile, how it affected the life of his civilization. And he wrote about it and talked about it, and history records it. So here we are with this concept. We're post-religious, all this concept of gods manipulating history and moving through it with their saviors and trying to wake us up. That's sort of passé now. That doesn't work for most of us in this room. But how about this concept? How about the organism has a purpose? How about the system has a life that moves toward life? And the energy that moves through this creation has a purposefulness about it. And that purposefulness is about health and wholeness and balance. So we go through, and now we have the epidemic, thank you, of racism. Well, how in the world did that happen? When did we become a racist country? We've been racist for 500, 600, 700, 800 years. All as long as someone preached that the other was different and the other was an object of fear. And the other could be subjected to our whims and wishes. We have grown from a small concept of who we are, the nuclear family, the extended clan, the tribe, the nation. And now we're in a cycle of growth and change that says we got to embrace the whole dang thing. Colors don't matter anymore. Ethnicity doesn't matter anymore, except we can talk about it and be proud of it. To say by the accident of your birth, you were born along the Nile. You were born along the Niagara. You were born along the Tiber. You were born along... We have nothing to do with this. We take ourselves too seriously and we give ourselves too much power. Our consciousness had no power over how we were birthed and where we were birthed. So let's begin with that premise. If we begin with that premise, we can move on to the notion that maybe life has a purpose. Maybe it has an intent. Maybe it's perfecting us. Maybe it is inviting us to be co-creators with this process. We sure have the power to destroy it. We can kill this planet. And we've been teasing around with ways to do that for a while. And maybe in the process of our conscious raising, maybe in the process of faiths that look beyond salvation to some magical heaven, to say that salvation we're looking for is for our kids and our grandkids to have health and wholeness and a promise of happiness and joy. That's what we're about. That's what we're going to devote our skills to. And here we are with an opportunity during all this hurt and pain, this dislocation. Look at this disparity in our country with wealth. Look at the differences in equality in our country. And we're the light of the world. Well, imagine how it is in Romania this morning, or Nigeria, or South Africa, or China. But we have a consciousness of that. We have information about that. We can feel that in our gut. We can put ourselves in those places, and that's mystical and that's spiritual power. Because if we can imagine it, we can get mad. And once we get over getting mad, we can get creative. Because it's not going to help to destroy anymore. It's not going to help to send stormtroopers to Ferguson, Missouri to make those people get right. It's going to be saying, we love you. What can we do? How can we behave in this culture? And how we can change these absentee landlords that sell these places to you at 3 times the price, and you're living in here and you have no opportunity. See, we're all complicit. We're all complicit. Check your portfolio. Check where your money is invested. Check about the choices that our bought politicians make. Look at the zoning laws. Look at the rights to own property in this country. Unitarian Universalism is an honesty and a courage to say, we are complicit in this. Now, how do we move forward to embrace the whole? We do it in love and creativity. The permanency of change. Life is moving through a process of adjustment and adaptation. And we're seeing broader and wider horizons. We're seeing better ways of making perfect this notion of life. Not that it will be there, but the United Nations was a dream of Woodrow Wilson. It became manifest 50, 60 years ago. It's been an ultimate failure since Korea because we still have national states and because we still have economic interests that aren't big enough or bold enough to see that the whole of life is what needs to matter. And greed will not make it possible. Sharing would make it possible. We need Henry Ford again. Henry Ford understood that you've got to pay people a decent wage so you can buy your product. So he paid $5 a day in Detroit when nobody else was paying that. Then they thought he was crazy. And the story goes, I'll have to get Earl to help me with this, but the story that goes, well, he said, well, somebody's got to buy my car, so I got to pay them a little money. Money begot money. That's simple economics. Not make all you can, make all the shoddiness you can, have disrespect for the buyer and the creation that you're doing. Do not rape the means of production or the natural resources to make a quick buck. It won't last. So consciousness is here in the human order. The organism is moving. It's traveling in its cycles. It's change in process. As seasons come and seasons go, the human spirit embraces and enlarges itself and can. The Crusades are just about 600 years ago. What a foolish thing that was. Sent out for the Lamb of Peace. Sent out by the Vicar of Christ to protect the trade routes for the spice trade. Guys, just read your history. Look at what we've done to ourselves. But there is always hope. There is always possibility. There's always a move that we can make toward the good and loving. Who's talking about that? Who's preaching that from pulpits? Who's saying that in the corridors of power? Who's saying it in corporate boardrooms? Who is saying, let's look at the whole and see if we can't be a part of that? Let's dream for 50 years out. Let's dream for 100 years out. You and I in this room have a finite consciousness. We'll be a memory in 20 years, 30 years, most of us. How's our life going to have been spent? How are we going to be remembered? How are our children going to speak of us? Dad was weird, and he always was, and I don't see how he made a living. How did he get to those people listening to him? Maybe there are a couple of people in this place, and there might be a few people along my trail that I've touched, or people have known me that have felt I've had something to say. I may have told you this story, but it's a good one. I'll tell it to you. Peggy and I were traveling in Northern Virginia about 4 years ago, and I went by my first little church. And I had this church in 1972, three. I served there 2 years, Sedley, near Manassas, Virginia. So I remember the geography a little. Of course, it's just grown-up suburbia now. Back then, it was country. So we're driving on this back road, and I remember one of my major church members' place, and they've long been dead, but that was their property there. So I pull up, and there's a fellow getting mail out of the car, out of the mailbox. So I pulled up beside him, and I said, does so-and-so live here? And he looked at me, and he said, you're the preacher. God, that was 30 years ago. This kid was like his kids here. So you never know what happens. He remembered me, I guess, because I was significant for him in some way, or his family's way. Well, those kind of blessings are pretty special. The permanency of change has to do with the fact that this organism and this system takes in the process the good stuff, and it processes, and it grinds it fine. This process said once upon a time, human slavery is wrong. And it had courageous men. It had a redneck from Kentucky who was not much better than his slave growing up, Abraham Lincoln, who saw another vision. And Abraham Lincoln was a pure racist. He thought the black people were less than white people, but he also thought that nobody had the right to own to somebody else. So let us not go in with the great expectations of all these super clean heroes that are going to have rescued us over the way. It's just people nudging forward to see some logic in life that says unless we protect this life, unless we bring means of health to it, unless we tend to the needs that's obvious to us, whether it's pollution, whether it's population control, whether it's poverty, whether it's disease, whether it's discrepancy of wealth, until these things are addressed as a whole, we are in trouble. So someone speaks out. Howard Zinn speaks out. Ralph Nader, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, obvious prophets saying to the world, is this the way we want it? Is this what we're going to settle for? Are we just going to be little warlords, eating and being all we can be, storing up all our treasures, and let life go to hell? What will your children say of you? And remember, in 1912, one black was lynched a week in this country. And our ancestors in this room, many of us, turned the other way or pulled the rope. Now that's a reality of life. And with that reality, we can find some grace and some humility to say, what can we do now? Roll up our arms, roll up our sleeves, sit down and talk about how do we relate to this. What do you want for your life? Your life? What do you want of your life, 16-year-old black person? What is your expectations? What has culture taught you and demonstrated to you as a value? Think a minute. You're 16. You see what's on the movies. You see what's in the literature. You see what's happening in the schools. You see what the drugs are. You see the politicians. You see the preachers. What in the hell are you going to do at 16 and see that? Are you going to be disgusted, dejected, turn inward, become defiant? If we will just open our hearts, open our eyes, embrace the struggle that it takes to be a human being in this life, we might find the patience and the goodness to lift one another up, be gentle and kind, and strive for understanding and creative responses to the challenge. The permanency of change is that change moves. And I think life presents opportunities, and we've got friction. When we've got issues such as racism, we've got issues of pollution, we've got issues of people not caring, we've got an apathetic culture. It's because culture is trying and life is trying to right itself. It's a period of restraint. It's a period of reaction. It's a period of just holding on. And that will break through with some creativity. It must. If it doesn't, life dies. And see, my ultimate faith is life won't die. Now, we might die, but the energy that moves through creation will live and will survive. There's a great TV show, After People. Have any of you seen that? It's a creative idea that scientists have put together so they 1 week after people, 2 weeks after people, 3 weeks. So they just use the basic understanding of science of what vegetation will do, what animals will do, how life will sustain itself. See, we're just passengers in this process. We're just predators. We're just parasites unless we choose something else, unless we choose to be participants, unless we choose to say, we've got some responsibility. What did Jesus say? Come follow me. What did the good guys say? Go and love. Be a person and be creative in the process of how you engage what's here. These are the gifts. These are the opportunities. You can make all the money in the world, you can build all the toys you want, or you can decide what to do in service to the life that you've been given. Service to the life you've been given. In service to the life that you've been given. In service to the life that you've been given. An opportunity to be creative, to move through with a process, and it begins right and left in your neighborhood, it begins in your family, it begins in your daily activity. To be patient and kind and understanding. To project yourself in that other's role and try to understand where they're coming from. And I'm the biggest sinner that ever was. I hate it. Leave me alone. I don't want to be bothered. Who are you? Get out of my way. We went over and sang at a nursing home last night. Well, that was the awkwardest time because all I saw was Mother. All I saw was my mama. And I looked at the finality of that. And those people were having fun, those that were aware. And they were singing. They were a part of that. And Doak's over here trying to make do, trying to sing, fussing at myself all the time, saying, let it go, Doak. Get out of your own stuff. Just see these people. Love these people. Embrace these people. And it was hard. I really couldn't do it. I tried, but I know what my challenge is, and I know what my opportunity is. The permanence of change is an opportunity for us to be participants in the change. What's the thing? Be the change you want to be. The opportunity to be about creating a life that's good and wholesome. And it begins with hope. It's demonstrated through love, and it comes about through endurance. Unitarian Universalists do not preach of a heaven to come. They do not even talk of the possibilities of justice. They all just invite you to work, to stand by the side of love and be a potent force in redeeming life for what it can be. Because we are evil people. We can be really selfish. And we can act out of anger and we can act out of resentment. Unless, as Mr. Lincoln said, the better angels of our nature doesn't take over. Permanency of change is saying that the angels of our nature can win. And as that author said a few years ago, love does win. You may be a part of it, or you may not be a part of it. May it be so. Amen.